What if Unohana was allowed to fight in Hueco Mundo?
ああ、やはり楽しいですね。戦いというのは挽回、水無月。
Besides Captain Kenpachi Zaraki, 3 captains were sent to Hueco Mundo: Retsu Unohana and Byakuya Kuchiki. But what if things were a bit different and Unohana was allowed to fight? Now the 3 captains dispersed as Zaraki went to help Ichigo and took on Noitora. Unohana knows Zaraki's secret and would be confident that he'd win the fight. Mayuri and Zalaparo were a match made in hell. And besides, Captain Kurotsuchi already had the Espada in checkmate before the fight even begun. And of course, Byakuya versus Zamari was a complete mismatch in the captain's favor. So what will Unohana do?
挽回加点胸骨唐松真珠挽回千本桜影石
挽回、水無月。
挽回観音開き紅姫改め
Yachiro Unohana was a first-generation Kenpachi, a monster among monsters. She would even wander the streets of Rokongai in search of battle. 8,000 Styles Yachiru was Soul Society's greatest criminal, one who was indispensable towards the battle against Yuhabaha and the Quincy's. Someone who was so powerful that not even Aizen wanted to face her. To be more specific, he thought he'd win the fight against her, but he would end up exhausting himself. And if you know anything about Aizen, this speaks volumes of Unohana's fighting power. During the Thousand-Year Blood War, despite sensing the battle between Genryusai and Yuha, or Royd, and despite being by Genryusai's side for over 1,000 years, she proclaimed that an awakened Zaraki should have no problem taking down Royd. That compared to an awakened Zaraki, Royd was not strong at all. And despite being weaker, she was able to show some degree of relativity to Zaraki when his power was unrestricted. She was someone he could actually enjoy fighting. In fact, they were roughly on the same level, but Zaraki was stronger and could overtake her. And being able to cause Aizen to burn tons of spirit energy in their fight is very significant, because even without his Kyoka Suigetsu, Aizen eclipses all of the Espada. In fact, the Espadas from 9 to 0 all obey Aizen because of his superior power. And Unohana being able to somewhat challenge this power should tell you how she would do against the Espada. She would literally overpower all of the Espadas in and outside Hueco Mundo. But luckily for Stark, Haribel, and Bargan, we are only concerned with Hueco Mundo, since that's where Unohana was sent. And here, Rudeborn and his men would be the first victims. Unohana could blitz them in a fraction of a second, or just use her Reiatsu. Aizen almost suffocated Grimmjow by flexing spiritual pressure, so imagine what Unohana could do to someone who was far weaker than Grimmjow. And since Ichigo was busy as he was being healed by Orihime as they watched Zaraki fight Noitora, Unohana would make Ulquiorra his next playmate. Assuming that Aizen and the others already left for Karakura town, whether Ulquiorra tries his first or second release, he's getting defeated. In the Spirits Are Forever With You, Zaraki fought against the original Zero Espada, Xylaporo Grants, although he was called Cien Grants in the novel, and along with possessing far greater spiritual pressure than the likes of Ulquiorra, he could fire off dozens of Gran Reiseros simultaneously. And even after matching this caliber of opponent and then getting stronger, base Unohana still described Kenpachi Zaraki as weak. In other words, base Unohana would quite literally slaughter Segunda Etapa Ulquiorra. He literally has no chance against her. For further reference, the strongest offensive power displayed by Ulquiorra was Lanza del Relámpago, and its power was magnificent. But Full Hollow Ichigo grabbed that lance in its densest form and crushed it. And the best comparison Full Hollow Ichigo has is to Cien Grants in a lesser form, and its regeneration is meaningless against someone who can destroy his organs, as her Minazuki even in base form would cut straight through him. And as for the strongest Espada number 0, Yammy, he is quite literally in the same boat. In both the manga and databook, he was confirmed to have inflicted deadly damage upon both Byakuya and Kenpachi, and the author described him as the actual strongest Espada. And for those who think he's too large and bulky, Kubo further added that Yammy more than makes up for any kind of movement issue because of his massive destructive power. Dealing with small opponents becomes less of an issue when your attacks are massive, possess speed at the level of Espada number 0, and carries the most destructive power among all the Espadas. He even took attacks from an Ichigo whom Unohana thought would be able to take on Aizen at full power, if the latter didn't use Kyoka Suigetsu and if Ichigo had his full powers restored, as he was less than halfway there. And although this Ichigo was not fully resolved, so this in no way scales Yammy to Aizen, but since the Espada saw Ichigo's attack as a mere nick on the neck, that speaks for itself. But as for Yammy's actual scale, he managed to damage both Byakuya and Kenpachi, who were both so strong at this point, Byakuya through his training and Kenpachi by releasing more power, that the author wrote that this was a perfect demonstration of the Espada's zero class of power. But this Kenpachi who is able to cut through Yammy with his Zanpakuto directly, being enormously weaker than base Unohana, again means that base Unohana would destroy Yammy. In other words, she clears the two strongest Espada who were currently in Hueco Mundo, both Ulquiorra and Yammy. So in short, Unohana would clean up Hueco Mundo. Now the real question is, what happens when she makes it to Karakura town? Be sure to like and subscribe for more, and see you guys soon.